Thank you everybody for joining us today. Today we're excited because we have Frank Russell and Ellen Lincolnhocker who are going to share with us how to use microlearning for training success. Frank has over 30 years of experience as a speaker and a talent development professional. He's founded 3 successful companies in the HR technology and training content space. And in 2007, Frank was voted to Training Industry's list of the most influential training professionals in the industry. In 2016, he was awarded the prestigious Learning Champion Award by eLearning magazine for his lifetime of contributions to the learning industry. Ellen is the Director of Marketing at Prositions, Inc., and she helps them with all aspects of the marketing and sales initiatives. A millennial herself, she brings a diverse perspective to this speaking duo. So we are excited to have Frank and Ellen, and we turn it over to you so we can find out how to use microlearning for our training success. Frank and Ellen, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Janice and Sharita, for welcoming us. We're excited to be here.
Yes, we are.
Without further ado, I'll let Frank take it away.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Janice, and we really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience today. We're excited to share some ideas about microlearning with you. I have to say that I am a Texas resident, even though we are calling in from Des Moines, Iowa today. I'm flying back this afternoon.
Hopefully you make it.
I do. So hopefully you all stay safe there in Houston. If you're located close to the water, we're watching the weather, and we appreciate you participating today over your lunch hour. So, you know, if you want to sit back and relax a little bit and maybe have your lunch as we go through this, we'll start the program. So the first thing that we would like to share with you is to look at, when you look at the PowerPoint that we're showing you today, we may not have a chance to get to every single point in it, but we are providing this through ATD for the participants. So you'll notice here that as I go through this, if you would like to use the PowerPoint to do your own internal training or your own work, we're happy to have you do that. I'll try to get through as much as we can today, but I just wanted to mention that that's one of the giveaways. We also have a couple of other things, don't we, have for them, Ellen?
Yep, so we'll go ahead and get that to you. It'll have the notes and also some speaking points in case you want to do microlearning. We'll also have an ROI calculator for you, and then also 30 days to microlearning so you can test it out too. But
yeah, a lot of goodies there for everybody. Well, thank you. So in our research, and the reason I mentioned that, you will see in the notes of the PowerPoint, when we reference a research study or some statistics or whatever, we've provided a link there for you to go to read the full article or whatever information is there supporting this. So this first slide that we're looking at here really talks about overall, when you look at some of the latest trends in learning that are happening today, we've tried to consolidate a lot of the research that we have done or the research that we've included in this presentation. And here's a highlight of some of the trends that we're seeing today. You know, obviously, you're probably aware that people are looking for learning in shorter segments or chunked down, and that's why we're going to be talking about microlearning today. But there are other things that are impacting learning. Learning is becoming more social. Obviously, with all the tools that we have today, whether it's video tools like YouTube or Facebook or all the other kinds of tools that we have, either internal or external within the organization, social is becoming a part of learning. We like to look for validation and those kinds of things, you know, when we're doing our learning. I know people will go out if you're shopping or whatever and see how other people view products or whatever. And one thing I want to point out here, Ellen, is a lot of times we'll talk about these trends in learning, but I just got an article, and I think we provide a link to that came from the Vice President of Marketing for Google. And in her article, she was talking about what they call micro moments. And it seems like this whole trend that we see in learning is actually part of a broader trend where people who are communicating, people who are purchasing products, all of these kinds of things that we do on a regular basis, even outside of work, are being encompassed in this big category called micro moments. So this is something that Google is pressing right now, that people want something that's very convenient, fast, and quick. And because they can have that in the larger part of what they do when they're communicating, they also expect to see that when they're going through their learning programs. Another thing that's a big trend is mobility, or the idea that I want to be untethered. I don't have to be at my desktop or on a laptop even. I do a lot of travel from Texas to Iowa, back and forth and all over the country. And when I sit on a plane or when I look in an airport, Ellen, most of the people I see today are using tablets or mobile devices when they want to communicate, learn, watch movies, whatever, or work. Another thing that, just like we're doing right now, which is this virtual program using a webinar, you see a lot more virtual training happening where we might be in the same place, but at the same time, but not in the same place. So a webinar is a good example of virtual types of training that are going on. Just yesterday, we were sitting in a conference call, and I had my grandchildren pop in the office here, and that was kind of fun. But I mentioned that because if I spend time with them and watch them on their phones, they love to play games or whatever. And because, the newer generations that are entering the workforce have grown up with these kinds of, games and et cetera, they're also expecting that in their learning experiences. And you've seen that when you look at, recent studies or whatever. Adaptive learning is important too, and we'll talk about how microlearning can be used in an adaptive way so that you can make it such that if I have a different learning style, maybe I am very active or drive a lot or whatever, and I want to get a short burst of information, will that learning program adapt to the way I want to receive that learning? So that's another big thing we'll talk about. Obviously, experiential, blended learning. The main thing we're seeing as an overall trend with these micro moments that came from Google and the research that we've done is what people would like to do is have their learning be very convenient. In other words, I want to be able to experience learning on my schedule, the way I want it, where I am at that particular moment. Can you provide it in a more convenient fashion? So let's go on and take a look at a definition of microlearning, because there are a lot of things that have been thrown around about what is really constitutes microlearning. Well, the main thing is this chunked idea, Ellen, that we've talked about, where you really break it down into sort of standalone little bite-sized nuggets, if you will. It should stand alone. And a lot of people ask me, well, how long is that, Frank? And I go and I say, well, it could be any length from maybe about a minute all the way up to 7 minutes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about YouTube and how YouTube has basically impacted the attention span of a lot of our learners, especially with video, micro videos. And the average YouTube is about 4 minutes and 20 seconds. So if you get beyond about 7 minutes in length, we're getting more into a traditional realm, but that's kind of what we do. Somewhere between 1 and 7 minutes in length per chunk, if you will.
Yeah, well, let's jump into kind of what we'll cover. Starting right off, Frank, if you want to tell us a little more about the modern learner.
Yeah, let's go in and we're going to talk about 6 concepts or major trends that we are seeing with microlearning and why, it's becoming hotter today. I'm sure you've seen, and read a lot of articles. It's published, almost every day, a new, research study or whatever that talks about why this is hot today. And I'm going to go through each one of those in a little bit more detail. So the first one really is the demand that's being driven by your learners. So as you have people who are entering your, organization, we used to talk, and I think you mentioned, Ellen is a millennial. Yep. I've got silver hair, so I'm a boomer. But the reality is we have a new generation entering that's sometimes called Generation Z. They're just graduating now, enjoying the workforce, and so we have multi-generations in the workforce. But our definition of modern learner isn't defined by generations. It's defined more by expectations. And so even though I may have grown up in a more traditional learning model, I feel real comfortable if I have a magic marker and a flip chart in front of me, and Ellen's laughing at me right now when I give presentations. Basically, I also consider myself to be a modern learner. I find that some of the things and trends that we've seen of all learners, that what they're expecting today would fit any generation. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that just a modern learner is somebody that's
just your new learner.
That's your new learner. Yeah, that's right. So what is the profile of a modern learner? From our perspective, it is, number one, they crave instant access to information. This shouldn't be surprising to us when we've grown up with, or we use Google, or we use different types of technology. I'm a big believer in using Siri on my phone, or also using Alexa when I use my Amazon device or whatever. People make fun of me a little bit because I have them at home and I have it at the office or whatever. But this is the idea that very easily I can quickly access information and have it at my fingertips. So if we've been doing that out in the larger market or whatever, it kind of supports that micro moments kind of concept again. People want to have that same kind of experience where they can quickly go out, get the information they need, use that information very quickly, and then be on their way. So instant access to information is one of the profile components for a modern learner. The other thing we mentioned is the idea of social validation. Again, if I go out on Amazon and I'm going to purchase something, I want to look at, how other people have rated the same kind of product that I may be interested in. And this was also validated in this Google research that said people are looking for what's rated as the best. So now, it used to be that you could be sort of the expert in front of the classroom and deliver your information like a subject matter expert. But today's modern learner also wants to seek validation socially to say, hey, what did you think of this content? Was it useful? What did you think of this experience? I'd like to share this experience with others. So modern learners also seek social validation. All of our learners are very, even if we don't want it to happen sometimes, we search constantly online to help us at work. In fact, there's significant research that we've included in your notes that points to the, the fact that on average, your employees, your team members will spend anywhere from an hour to 2 hours a day searching for information online to help them be more productive. That's a very significant chunk of the workday, and so we're all out there looking for answers and helping us to be more productive in the workplace. Now we can talk about attention spans too. There's recent research that came out and said if you take the average attention span for an adult in the year 2000, okay, just about 17 years ago, and compare it to today, you're going to find that where we had about an average of 12 seconds, that has now dwindled down to about 8 seconds. To put that in perspective, I think this came out of a Time magazine research article. The goldfish has an average, attention span of 9 seconds. So it does mean that we can get bored very quickly and very easily. We can get distracted, and so we need to make sure that we're engaging our learners when we use micro-learning techniques so that they can constantly, be engaged in that learning, process. Another big trend that we do see too, and we've talked about this, is modern learners are very used to using their mobile devices to access knowledge, information, and also to be trained, using those devices. There's some statistics here that say the average American, we basically access our phones 8 billion times a day. I think that may be low now.
Still astounding.
Yeah, 150 times per day. I put mine to the side now when I'm presenting here, Ellen, but I have to remind myself not to look over and check my phone. But what this says to us, basically is that people are now looking at their phones as one of the primary ways they're going to interact, learn, do business, or whatever. And so micro-learning, and also then we'll talk a little bit about micro-videos, fit perfectly into that, platform. The good news is, and I've been involved, as you know, Ellen, in the learning industry for 30 plus years. I've developed major software applications, that sort of thing. Typically, when I've seen in the past, decades that I've been working is, every time you implement some kind of new technology, it slowed down a little bit because you have hardware configurations. Like I remember when, we first started streaming video, we had to wait because organizations didn't have the bandwidth to pull it into their, organizations. The thing that's different about this revolution that's happening with microlearning is people already with their own personal devices now have access to this, so that lag that happens sometimes with that hardware configuration that you need to have kind of goes away. So there's a lot of things that, that are happening in the market that mean the organization with little investment, can really be up and running with a micro-learning solution without having to wait for or invest in expensive infrastructure or whatever.
Right. And Frank, you had mentioned this Generation Z. So this is another interesting stat that you'd put in here about their phones.
Yeah, if we look at it, when I first heard this, it just kind of hit me like, I should have had a V8, a tomato juice or something. But the idea is simply this, is that the only phones that Generation Z, have used are going to be smartphones. And when I described to Ellen here, what a brick phone was, or what we started out with, when I first started using cell phones, I get this kind of deer in the headlight look like, wow, that sounds like old and antiquated. So again, people are used to using these devices in their hands to do many different types of things. So new generations entering in are having very high expectations about what's going to be delivered on their mobile devices. And this is an interesting statistic here. Over 70%, and I know this is increasing, over 70% of your employees will now use their personal mobile devices to access job-related information and training. So again, they want it this way, and they want to have it in a format that is of high quality and what they can expect when they're using other types of streaming video or whatever. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second.
Well, you'd mentioned the YouTube video, so let's get into the guts of what that stat's really about. Why is it so meaningful?
It is, and I'm sure everybody, has gone out and looked at YouTube. I consider it to be one of the greatest training sites that are out there. There is certainly a tremendous amount of information that is on YouTube today. For example, they have over 1.3 billion users and over 1 billion views of micro videos per day, all coming from mobile devices alone. So YouTube has shaped the way, not just in North America, but the world really views, education and information and entertainment. And Nielsen recently did a research study, and what they're looking at from a marketing perspective is more and more people are expecting their information to be delivered in a visual format. So YouTube has impacted a lot of this, Vimeo and other services, and when you look at what they're getting on these videos, that's why we're a big proponent of, if you're going to do micro-learning, you probably want to look at micro video as one of the primary formats you're going to deliver in. Now, you can deliver text and even SPORM courses on mobile devices, but video seems to be growing in popularity and demand when you're considering, developing or purchasing micro-learning. Now, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so they're all asking themselves, well, great, I'll just make YouTube available.
Yeah, why not? It's free,
yeah, right? So here's some reasons why not.
That's right. So if you remember, Forrest Gump, and the famous line, you never know what you're going to get, like a box of chocolates. That's kind of what happens if you were just to leave YouTube as your primary training device, if you will. There can be a lot of good information up there, but the problem is it's not curated. And by that I mean the information that's there may or may not be correct. It may be popular. You could look at that and say, look at this, got 1 million views. But the reason it gets 1 million views may be because it's funny, not because it's the information you want to communicate to your learning audience. So that's one reason why you need to be a little skeptical and careful about just using YouTube for your learning, even if you have a private channel. Another thing that's a big distractor here, and we've included an ROI calculator for you all, so you can kind of look at how much time people could potentially waste just by going out to some of these sites. On average, when people go out to search information on sites like YouTube, where they may only need 5 minutes of information, like a little micro moment, if you will, a micro video, they actually end up spending anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours per day doing that sort of thing. So the problem with YouTube is I'm sitting here watching it, and then all of a sudden I see these little recommended videos that come up on the right side, and there's something that looks funny, got 1 million views, I'm going to click on that. No, here's some cute things about kittens or something going on. Not only do I laugh about that and look for more, but now I'm going to just basically send that link to my coworkers, and you can see quickly how this can basically spiral into sort of this great drain of productivity within your organization. So we are proponents of saying there is a better way, we think, to do that sort of thing, and that is if you could create your own private network so that people aren't going to be distracted by some of those things. And again, we're going to provide for you an example of how that can be done. So at the end of the program, if you link to that, you'll be able to see, what we're calling, an example of that, and there are others that are out there that you might want to check out. So that's a little bit why we may not want to use YouTube as our primary training source. Now, why are all of these, things and the research we're talking about, why is this happening today? Well, here are just a few of the things that the modern learner has access to in the broader, market area. They'll go to YouTube, they'll use Wikipedia, they'll do podcasting, which we're big proponents of. I love podcasting, by the way. All of these things raise the bar of expectations for our learners. And when that happens, when they come to work, they're expecting to see the same kind of technology. So one of the things we say is, while we think microlearning would be good just for talent development, I also believe by having access to some of these microlearning tools or et cetera, it sends a message to people that you're trying to recruit and also the people you're trying to retain. Because if they can get access to the latest technology, information, that sort of thing, then they'll, a lot of people will say, hey, this is a great place for me to stay. This is in tune with what's happening out there in the broader market. I want to, spend my career or a part of my career working for an organization that's with it. It's doing the right kinds of things. It's communicating and basically adapting to the way I want to learn and work in today's modern environment.
There's another facet driving this, and that's coming from the inside.
Yeah, I mentioned sort of my experience in the marketplace. The company that we worked with before this one was a big learning management system company, and we built a global platform that had millions of users on it. I mean, down in Texas, Dell used our system, Nike used our system, Google used the system, and about 50 agencies of the federal government. So it was a major platform. The problem with it was that it was developed at a time, like a lot of learning management systems that are out there today, prior to some of the mobile technology taking place, and then also prior to some of the social things happening. And what you're finding today is we're using that same old technology, but the learner has new expectations like the microlearner. And what this does is compounds it, because now people are saying, hey, I want to get my learning in small chunks, but now you're making me take a 1 or 2 hour, e-learning course. Now, I'm not saying that, SCORM-based e-learning is going to go away, that learning management systems aren't still going to be important. But what I am saying is, as we change the expectations, or the learner's expectations change, we need to adapt our systems to keep up with that. If we don't, then you're going to get a situation like this, where unfortunately your learners are going to look down and go like, another 2-hour course, oh my gosh, or whatever. So anyway, what microlearning can do, and there's research that supports this, shows us that by breaking that learning down into smaller chunks, you can actually, instead of fatiguing your learners, you can actually energize them and help prevent mental burnout. So there's some interesting statistics that are out in the market today about that. And then as you look at all of these kinds of things, we go back to this idea that even though I'm a big proponent of using the latest technology with your learning strategy or whatever, I also know that you shouldn't just throw, as I sometimes say, the baby out with the bathwater, that we have made significant investments in learning systems or whatever. Some of this new micro-learning technology can easily adapt into what you already have, so you can actually get the best of both worlds, Ellen. You can still use a traditional LMS and still use your self-paced learning or classroom learning, but now you can begin to integrate in micro-learning to help support your traditional learning approaches. So another thing that's impacting the worker today is what I call the busy work environment. There's a lot of research out there that's been done, a lot of it by my friend Josh Burson at Deloitte and others, where he basically says that on average, the worker gets interrupted every 4 minutes. Now, I think in our office it's every 2 minutes, because we've got a strong team environment here, and nobody's shy about bursting in to do different kinds of things. But when you take a look at the average amount of time that an employee has to dedicate per day to training, and I think this comes from the Deloitte study, it's about 5 minutes a day. Now, the interesting fact about that is that fits right into that realm of micro-learning. So whether I do it every day or I do it, in 5-minute little bursts when I can do that sort of thing, this idea that people are very, very busy fits in with that convenience model that says this is how I have time to access it. So now in a busy day, I can fit my training in rather than having to sit down for 2 hours to take a program. I can get it in little chunks. And again, this research pointed out that 58% of the employees that they surveyed in this particular study said, hey, I would use the existing technology you have more often if you broke that down into little chunks. So again, use your existing systems, add some micro-learning components, and you get the best of both worlds. So other benefits that come to the learner, again, by using micro-learning, as we've said before, it's more convenient to the learner. It's more adaptive. Again, if I do a lot of, I put my headphones in at night because I wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and, I love to listen to TED Talks or listen to podcasts. So one of the things you can do with micro-learning is it doesn't always have to be video. You can actually make an audio component to that. But this is the idea that you're taking your content and adapting it to the different needs of your learners. If I were to sit there with my little screen at 3 a.m. in the morning, my wife would wake up, probably conk me on the head for, because she finds it hard to get to sleep. But I can put my little headphones in and I can listen to the same information. That adapts to my need as a learner. Or maybe I'm biking, I like to do bicycling, or if I do, walking around the lake, I get the learning at the time and the moment that I want in the modality that's most convenient for me. This can also increase retention and other, significant benefits that come out of this. So one of the things we do know is that it can also impact speed to competence. If you have a micro-learning program that's accessible to people, and here you can see, some people out in the field, working or whatever, if they have a need to access quick information or basically to get up to speed to something, this can be an assistive device like a performance support tool to help somebody on the job, which speeds up, this concept to, getting to a level of competency faster. And now another thing that we want to take a look at is you can also, and I know everybody that's in the audience today has plenty of money and budgets and you never feel stretched about the resources, and nobody, like a CXO comes down to you and say, we have to do more with less. I know that never happens to you, but to some people it does. And one of the neat things about, this micro-learning concept, Ellen, is it also can break your budget down a little bit. It can be more cost-effective because if you think about how much it costs to develop, let's say, an hour to 2 hour e-learning program, and we do that too, and we certainly, have done that in our organization, and you break that down into small little chunks, it can actually be more cost-effective to do it that particular way. It also means that you can roll out your program faster because instead of designing a 1 or 2 hour program, you've broken it down in these little components. If you then want to edit and modify it, you don't have to, open up the 2 hour program. Even if you have reusable learning objects, you can go back to that one little component, that video or whatever it is, make that modification. And as we know, unless it's an evergreen kind of subject, whether you're dealing with HR compliance, whether you're dealing with anything that has a legal impact or latest technology, it's always constantly changing. So if you only have to change those small bits instead of the whole program, it can be much more cost effective. A lot of other benefits that come from this in terms of managing it. You also find if you're going to globalize or translate or localize, it can also save you time and money too.
Now, Frank, I know this next section is probably your favorite.
It is. Thank you. I am. I think one of the biggest things that I see when I look at micro-learning, one of the biggest benefits is what I call sometimes the forgotten learner. We now, and this is increasing, we have more and more people who are non-traditional workers. So there was research that just came out about a month ago, Ellen, that said, it kind of shocked me a little bit. It's that 82% of our workers in North America don't have access to desks. So I know we're dealing in the Texas area, and I know we're down in Houston, big oil, energy area. A lot of those workers are going to be in places where they're not going to have access to a desktop or a laptop or whatever. So here are some of the, different types of positions that can benefit from it. When you make this into micro-learning and you make it mobile, all of a sudden you begin to reach people that we traditionally could not reach before. So why I get excited about this is, we were working with an organization and they were a bottling plant. and they were thinking of installing a kiosk in their plant, so people could line up to take their training. And I said, why in the world would you want to do that? Why not just deliver the training? How many of your people, that are out delivering or working the plant have access to a mobile device? Oh, well, probably 95% of them. So why wouldn't you want to deliver that to them in a way that's convenient for them? So this is something that can happen, and why I get excited about it is we can now more conveniently reach a larger population of learners than we could ever do before. And the other thing I love about it is it can also reach them right at their moment of need. You've heard me tell this story before, and I'm a firm believer in it. A lot of you may have to do safety training out there, or you have a component, within your organization that is responsible for OSHA or whatever it is. Recently, we added over 1,000 safety videos to our new MicroLearning platform.
Which you can try later.
Yeah, we're going to give you a chance to go out and try that. But here was the thing that kind of, shocked me a little bit. So I could go, and typically if I wanted to do my annual, training to be certified, let's say in ladder safety, okay, I could go on, I could do a laptop, I could take my training, I could be certified, and then, I, check the box, that's all great. Maybe I didn't have to use a ladder for 6 months or something, especially around an electrical power line. But now I'm out in the field, or I'm working in a plant, and I have to go use my ladder, and it's close to an electrical, power line or whatever that is. And then I remembered 6 months ago from my certification training that there were 5 things to remember with ladder safety around, power lines. And I could only remember 4 of them and not the 5th one. So what would I have to do? Run back to my office, get back in my truck, go back to the office, log into the LMS, find out what that is or whatever, or pull out my phone, type in LAD, all of a sudden there's 6 videos that are really short that pop up, electrical, I click on that one. The first part I missed, never use a metal ladder. So I take my metal ladder back and get a fiberglass one. And my point about all of this is that I could be a certified, dead person, that's a bad way to put it, or I could be alive because I had right at my fingertips the exact knowledge and information that I needed when I need it. So this is why I get excited about this, is because for the first time we can really put that training and knowledge right in your pocket right when you need it. So that's what I do, Ellen, get excited about that.
Well, you had mentioned podcasts, and I know audio is another way to provide micro-learning. Absolutely.
And there are different formats, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because you can still do, print, you can still do SCORM courses too. But I'm a big believer, because podcasts are growing, that when you decide if you're going to develop internally or you're going to look at a provider for your micro-learning, try to make sure that it comes in an audio-only version too. Again, if we want to reach broader audiences out there, if somebody wants to do it while they're exercising, in the picture that we have here, if somebody's driving, if somebody is in a location where you'll be distracted, I don't know if you, Ellen, and I, when I'm driving, shocks the heck out of me when I see these people that are texting, while they're driving or whatever. Well, I'd like to go and just say, hey, couldn't you just listen to the content rather than try to read it on your phone or watch the video or whatever. So I'm a big proponent of that. And then also having disconnected learning, so that I could, when I step on a plane, if I can't basically have my phone, access, the internet or whatever, I could download that content, I could listen to it at my convenience, and then, when I get back in, then I've completed my little micro-learning or whatever. So we talk about that. We'll give you some examples again in the demo that we have set up for you, so that you can take a look at it and try it out. See if you can download that audio and see what it does for you. But one of the things when you're designing, if you're designing your own learning, what to think about is, this is what always bothers me a little bit about TED Talks. I'll be listening to those, and all of a sudden they'll say, now you see on the screen. The one thing you want to be careful of, if you're thinking about an audio version of this, don't try to refer to visuals there. And it's amazing what you can do by just closing your eyes and listening to what that soundtrack does. So all the new products that we develop in the micro-learning area, you can either get an audio-only version or a visual version, and they work equally well together.
All right, this next section is all about new technology. How can you make it work to your advantage?
Well, I think when we move to now these micro, platform devices like smartphones and tablets and other kinds of things, we have to go back to that idea of what does the modern learner expect today? So out in the broader market, they will be watching on their phones things like Netflix. We mentioned YouTube. They'll be out on Amazon, whether they're watching movies or shopping or Hulu or whatever it is. When they look at that on their phone, they are actually getting extremely high quality, television. And so they're getting a view there that is very high quality. So when they do that, when they go in and they want to get their microlearning, they're going to expect the same kind of quality. And the reality is, many times if you are developing a SCORM course, we actually have to dumb the video down a little bit and not make it quite as high quality as we can get with high def. And so when people look at, and we just went to a recent trade show, and we had several devices set up, and they were watching the video on the mobile devices, they were blown away at how good the quality of the video looked. And again, it just enriches the experience, and it meets the expectation of the modern learner, what they want to see when they're going into your training programs or whatever. And this is where I have a cautionary tale, because at that same trade show where we participated, I walked around and I talked to probably 90% of the vendors, and they all said, oh yes, we're mobile friendly, or we're mobile ready, or we're even mobile responsive, meaning that their software or their content would play on a phone. But then I asked them, yes, but are you mobile first? And when I got, sort of that stare and look, like, what does that mean? Or maybe they knew what it meant. We're providing you here with a definition and what we think is critical for the modern learner today. So adaptive, models are simply what happens on the TV. If you're sitting in your family room and you're watching a movie and you see the black band across, you can adjust the size of that picture to match the screen. That means it's adaptive. Responsive screen design simply means that the device you're using is smart enough to know how you've designed that program, and it will allow that to fit on that screen. Now that sounds great and wonderful. The problem with that is this. A lot of times if you take a straight SCORM course and it's got text on it, or you have to interact with it, or you have to take a test or whatever, that print size is very, very small. So in order to interact with that course, what you have to do is what I call pinch to zoom. You have to expand it. When you expand it and do all of that, and if the quality of the video is lower than what you could get on a Netflix or whatever, all of a sudden your learner's going to look at this and think like, this really wasn't designed for a mobile device, and that is correct. That course, that content, was designed for a bigger screen, and they made it, they sort of retrofitted it so it would fit on a phone. In many instances, that's fine, but mobile first says this: the content or the platform was designed to play on a smaller screen first, and then it will adapt to a larger screen. So typically what this all means is you get a much better experience on a mobile device if you use a mobile-first design. So if you're out analyzing content, if you're developing content in a microlearning format, or if you're looking for a platform, ask them, is it mobile first? And if you get that look a little bit and they hem-haw around, do I have to pinch to zoom? You'll know that it's not, it's responsive, and that may impact the experience for your learners. That's why we mention it. So let's put it all together and let's talk about this, because I want to be able to leave time for questions and everything else. So what does this mean for us as talent development professionals? A lot of stuff I've been talking about here for some people is like overwhelming. Do I have to go and throw everything out and scrap it and do all this other stuff? Absolutely not. As a talent and development professional, I see this as one new tool that we're putting in a tool belt. You've seen carpenters as they walk around right there, on their hips. You can grab a hammer, pliers, whatever you need, screwdriver, and it's available right there. What microlearning does is it gives us a new tool to use. So the way I recommend to, training and development professionals is, don't dive in head first. Let's go out and do a pilot. Let's experiment with our users. Let's find out where it's going to have real impact. Do I have a portion of my learning audience that is out in the field that's not getting training in a convenient way? Could I start with that group and see how they could react to some of this microlearning? And then I can bring it in maybe to the larger corporate office or whatever. But it's not going to be, it doesn't have to be revolutionary. You can take it one step or one bite at a time. Now we also, we indicated that microlearning can come in many different formats, many different fashions. I'm a big believer in doing video and audio are ways that...
It's probably the most popular.
It is, and it's growing. but you could still do it with text. The only thing I say if you're going to provide text as a part of that or supplement, your video and audio with text is make it as visual as you can, I mean, text can be boring. It can be small, hard to read sometimes. But if you can make it like put a checklist in and make it visually, interesting, or tests when you design them, just consider those kinds of things. And, even though it's responsive, you can still take some of your SCORM content, or you can develop it in a way that makes it much more mobile friendly, or even mobile first. So there's all kinds of choices that we have for delivering microlearning in different types of formats.
Yep, and Frank, I know you make a lot of microlearning, so you want to tell us a little more about the best practices if they want to make their own.
Yeah, some of the tips and pointers that we have are very simple. Number one, when you develop it, try to make sure that it kind of stands alone as a complete, it'll be small, but a complete learning experience. In other words, it's not just a continuation and you leave me hanging to the next one.
Does it fit in that 5 minutes I have?
That's right, and if you have to, extend it a little bit to 7 minutes, because, we do all kinds of programs, like we do leadership training, and sometimes it's hard to get it down to a minute or 2 minutes when you're, dealing with a fairly complex process or whatever. But try to get it into a chunk, if you can. And that takes some, instructional design savvy or whatever, but the more you work with it, it's not that difficult to do. Also, when you begin to put these together, you can actually link them. So what you could do is put step 1, step 2, step 3. They all stand alone as complete steps, but I might be able to put a 20-minute program together with 5 steps of 4 minutes each. And I could link those together. So I can get this step and then this step, and basically, so you want to make sure that what you're doing kind of fits together and it's in a step-by-step approach. You want to make sure that it has very convenient access. The whole reason we want to use microlearning is to make it convenient for the learner. If they have to have a complex process to log in on a phone and do a bunch of stuff, even though you've got microlearning, then basically they may be turned off about how much energy it takes for them to get access to that content. So look at your technology. If it's your LMS or however you're delivering it, make sure you're not putting barriers on the front end that with all this great content you've developed in microlearning, people can't access it conveniently. You want to be able to get in and find exactly what they need. By chunking it down, you can then tie it in with your search engine so they're finding the exact little skill that they need to practice. So those are some important things to do. So anyway, those are just some tips. The other thing I say is don't think about, microlearning, or here I call it performance support, as an end-all, be-all. You have classrooms. 50% of training is still done in the classroom. But imagine, if you will, and that we've got a new program coming up where I talk about how to incorporate microlearning into a larger blended learning program. And the example we use is a leadership development program. And with that, there is a classroom component. And believe me, it would be nice if we could do leadership development all by microlearning. In some instances, I think it is possible. But there's a tremendous benefit of still doing some training in the classroom. You can interact. You can make, basically, you meet people that may, through your career and your company, have connections and communication. It adds a social element, etc. You can tie it in with virtual training like we're doing with a webinar. But anyway, I encourage you, if you want to, check us out, maybe we'll, come back to, ATD and do another webinar where we talk about how do you combine, microlearning into a complete blended learning program to add a much richer experience. And some of the ways you can do that, Ellen, are you can use it as pre or post to your training event. Before they come to your classroom training, you've given them some little pre-work to do, or afterwards as follow-up. We all know about the forget curve that happens when people participate in a training program. Microlearning is a great way to reinforce, traditional types of training. You can link it together. We're big proponents in saying, hey, maybe we'll do a serial. We'll send out once a week or once a month. We're going to send out a little, bit of learning out to people. We can push that, learning out to them. That's another way to do it. Or you can use it as true performance support. In other words, in our product that we have 3,000 videos, and you can access those instantly by typing in a few letters. So in this instance, you have somebody here. Hopefully, he's not doing open heart surgery or anything, and still having the life. But even if he is,
know what he's doing.
Absolutely. But what this simply means is Now I've got a wealth of a library of quick information at my fingertips to use right when I need it at the moment of need. So that's more like a performance support solution. And there are differences, when we get involved in this sort of thing, when we talk about when do I use training, traditional training, as opposed to microlearning, especially when it's performance support. We've got some things we'll include in here. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail about it, but training is when you want to learn something. I mentioned open heart surgery. Of course you want to have somebody who's gone to medical school and practiced and done all of that. But if there are new things that are coming out or whatever, and you have to do something on the moment, on the spot, like the ladder safety I mentioned or whatever, performance support could, supplement that, or it could be a wonderful development resource tool. Another thing is, so if you're using something where you need to certify people and you need to validate that they can pass a test and do all of that, well, you're probably going to be leaning more to traditional training. If it's long-term development, like the heart surgeon or whatever, or long-term leadership skills, that sort of thing, complex sets of skills, that's more traditional. But remember, we can blend in microlearning with that. On the other hand, if you're going to do microlearning or performance support, let's say I have somebody that's coming in late, and I have to have a conversation with them. And I went to leadership training 4 years ago, and I got to remember exactly what I do or say or whatever. If I could just go to my little, my little microlearning platform, and there's a little 4-minute video that says, this is exactly how you say and what you say to an employee that's coming in late, and how you handle it in a positive and constructive way, and you can even see how the employee, reacts or whatever. That's more performance support. And so we mentioned the other things like safety and product information, things that, you don't have to use your memory for. You can have them right at your fingertips. That's when microlearning can also be very beneficial. It can be delivered, in a variety of different formats. I mentioned what we're going to be talking about in our next webinar, and that's really going to be how you can take it and incorporate it into a very sophisticated, multimodal delivery platform, and we'll talk about that later.
So if they want to look into their own technology, what could they look for?
Okay. Yeah, if you're going to go out and you're going to say, hey, I'm very interested in this, I want to go to the next step, and maybe I'm going to consider buying some, off-the-shelf microlearning. I think here's a checklist that I would certainly do. Make sure that it's mobile-first design and not just mobile responsive. I think also make sure that there's real high-quality video that's there, because that's what your audience is going to expect, or high-quality audio. You'd want to make sure that if you're subscribing to a library, that it's comprehensive, and those kinds of things. And then, I highly encourage people to, start thinking about developing your own micro videos. The phones that we're using now to access this training, actually most of them have a camera in it that's better in terms of resolution than 5 years ago. I would buy a camera for $20,000. So there are some tips and techniques you need to kind of polish these. So there are times when you don't want to go do your own in-house video, like, you're going out to your customers and you need high quality or whatever. But don't be afraid to experiment with your own microlearning and producing your own too.
Tips for partners? Partners,
if you're going to go out and look for a partner, here's one of the common mistakes I find. There are a lot of people out there that have great technology, but they really don't their DNA doesn't come from the learning and development industry. So they're going to be good on features and high on the technology, but not really sound in terms of training and development, instructional design, or whatever. Incorporating it in, where to use it, when to use it, or whatever. I mean, there's a big LMS provider that's out there right now, or has a new technology. They're saying, throw out your LMS, take it all away, don't do this all and everything else. And, I think that's a little radical. So when you're choosing a partner, make sure you balance those two things with, do they have a background in the area of microlearning, and do they also have great technology, and do they understand, talent development? Those are the things I would look for.
All right, let's bring this home so we can get to the questions. Like we mentioned at the beginning, we'll send you the PowerPoint. It'll have all of the notes and talking points. So if you want to repeat any of this to your peers, colleagues, you can do that. We'll send you the ROI calculator as well, so you can calculate the time wasted searching for information and how microlearning might make an impact on that. Mm-hmm. And then also we'll send you 30 days access to our microlearning so you can test it out, see what it's like, see if you like it, and really get a first-hand look at what that is.
Yeah, so those are some freebies. So let's turn it over and let's see some of the questions that you have, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. So.
Okay. Hello, Frank, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. We do have a couple of questions. So the first question we have, is there a reason you might not want to use microlearning?
Good question. Is this Sharita? Thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Sharita. As I mentioned before, there are times when you might want to choose a different way to deliver it. For example, I was talking about leadership training. I'm a huge believer when you sit down in a classroom environment and you're sharing your ideas and experiences about, becoming a new leader or whatever, you can form bonds and partnerships with those people that could serve you for the rest of your career in that particular organization. I used to work for, did training, leadership training for Mobil Enron, Mobil, Oil, and they had a big program they did in, in Fairfax, Virginia, and it was a week-long live-in program for leaders. In that particular instance, the benefit of being able to interact will far outweigh the little micro-learning moments. Now, I say that, and I'll also come back and say, if back then when I was doing that training, I was the kickoff speaker for their Leadership Institute, if we could have used micro-learning then, it would have greatly enhanced the program, both pre-work and post-work. But I will say, you just have to look at it and say, what is this really good? What are the benefits that it delivers? But then there are other benefits that traditional training, e-learning. I'm not saying you shouldn't have 1 hour or 2 hour e-learning courses. I mean, there are some things that you have to take and certify to make sure people understand it, and you want to be able to test them. So in those instances, yes, please use those traditional things, but I would say let's open our tool belt a little bit, see if we can add a hammer in there and maybe incorporate a little bit of micro-learning to enrich the overall experience.
Okay, so that now gives me another question, and not to, I guess, drag it on so much, but with that said, with being in an industry where we're so accustomed to classroom and e-learning and the traditional type training, how would I even start to incorporate the micro-learning into my organization?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I'm also a very big believer when you're beginning to introduce something that's new, whether it's content or new methodology or a new technology, don't do what I call the Microsoft Windows mistake. Maybe if you're old enough to remember, when they were introducing, Windows, and it crashed on stage. Or I go way back to the introduction of the minivan when the door got stuck and the Chrysler and, executives were in there. I'm a big believer in what I call a pilot program. What that means is, don't roll it out to your entire organization. Work with, either if you're going to do it internally or if you're going to work with a partner, set it up so you can look for a group that, could get tremendous benefit out of micro-learning. Maybe it's one of these hard to reach, groups of people, that we can't reach with traditional training very well, or it's very expensive to do. And then do a pilot, maybe it's 5 people or 100 people or whatever it is. And then set that up and then have a survey at the end to see, basically what benefits they're getting out of it. We have a brand new pilot program that we're rolling out right now that's complementary, that basically what we've tried to do is set it up for, training professionals. If they want to do a pilot, we've got an introductory email. We give them free access to it. We let them roll out, and then we have a little survey at the end that either we or they can do. Right, Ellen?
Yep.
And then you get it from your users. Nothing will help you roll out a program more effectively than the people who are being impacted to get back to you and say, wow, this was really great. I really got a lot out of it. And then, you can be a champion for their cause. But I would say pilot, test it, and then gradually roll it out to a larger audience if the results that you're getting back show you that you're really getting benefit out of it. That's what we recommend highly.
Okay, that's some great information. I believe we have one other question. So after how long of micro training would you allow a trainee to take a break? For example, giving a 5-minute break after 20 minutes of micro training.
Yeah,
I hope I'm saying your name right. Andreas? Andreas asked that question.
Yeah, I think, to me, what I would do is, rather than thinking about it as a break, if you get a chance to go out and use DashTrain, which is the tool we're going to, allow you to access, I think, the way we recommend it is just let them access it how they want to access it. In other words, don't think of it as a shortened version of, traditional classroom training. Think of it more as, right here we're doing a webinar and this is going to take about an hour. Well, that's still longer than a micro-learning moment. What we would recommend is simply this, is that take a look and give people access. Use it more in the beginning as a performance support tool. Now, if you want to incorporate it in with your traditional classroom training, what I would highly recommend is think about some things that they could, get access to prior to coming to the training program. Maybe it's specific tips and techniques. Maybe it's some little, mini case studies or whatever. And then they could come prepared for the classroom training. Classroom training is very expensive, time-consuming for everyone, etc. But by doing these things so that they're prepared for it. The other thing I would say is also use it after the training. So we do know when people get back on the job, they have a tendency to get very busy again. They forget about things. If you push out, like every week, a little reinforcer that goes out to the training audience that you had in the classroom, and we'll show you this in our upcoming webinar. We're going to show you exactly how you can do a leadership program. You keep the core of that program, which can be delivered either in a classroom or a self-paced version, and then every week you can send out this little bit of micro-learning that they can also use to practice and do things experientially. We're big believers in the 70-20-10 model, that people really change their behavior when they can experience it on the job. You can use micro-learning to do the same kind of thing too. So I would not see this as something where, hey, we're going to go and take, 5-minute, little micro-learning in the classroom. I would look at it as saying it would supplement what that is, and then maybe you do something different when you're in the classroom or whatever. Hopefully that makes sense to y'all.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions, and we're approaching our 1 o'clock. So.
Great. Well, thank you all. We really appreciate you hosting us today, and if you have any questions or any other information, please reach out. Go and use those tools that we've provided for you. After that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for being gracious hosts for us, from Houston here at ATD. We all want you to remain safe and everything. We'll be thinking about you, and hopefully I'll be able to get back to Dallas this evening
yes.
On my flight. But thank you all very, very much for participating.
Thank you, Frank and Ellen. It was great information. We appreciate you guys being with us today. Hope everybody got some tips and took some great notes, and will access the information that they're providing to us. Have a great rest of the day. Be safe out there, and be sure you gather your water and whatever you need to gather before the storm hits if you're located in the Houston area. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.